This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine the business case for compliance to the new conflict minerals rule.
Plus, a wide-ranging look at multiplexer technology. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for October 4th, 2013. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richman. First up in the news this week, the National Institute of Standards and Technology has announced $7.4 million in grants to fund research into the fast-growing field of additive manufacturing, which many of us here and all over refer to, I think, as 3D printing. That's right. The money is going to two separate groups. $5 million is going to the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute, or NAMI, and $2.4 million is going to Northern Illinois University. Both of these groups are collaborating on their projects with many other organizations in industry and academia, including leaders such as Boeing, Georgia Tech, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, General Electric, Northwestern University, and more than 24 others. The NAMI project emphasizes a three-part research plan to provide the tools needed for additive manufacturing applications to progress from prototypes to market-ready products. The NIU project, on the other hand, is intended to develop a closed-loop manufacturing process for quality assurance and control of the parts and products that are made with these technologies. So, this is a continuation of the trend that we've seen. We've seen it for a while now, and I'm sure it's not going to be any end soon, where government, industry, and academia are joining together to help foster innovation in these cutting-edge technologies. And we know this in looking at the past, that capital is going to flow to the geographic areas where there's a lot of innovation. And the innovative mindset is going to yield the companies, the organizations, the industries that consumers want, the products that consumers want. In other words, that yields profits, right?
That's right.
That's what it all comes down to. Now, here in the United States, I think the message has gone through loud and clear that again, government, industry, and academia need to work together on this. So I think that message is going through very loud and clear, and I'm sure, without a doubt, we've seen a lot of it in the past. You're going to see a lot more of these programs coming up in the future that are going to be funded probably through NIST and other organizations like NIST to help foster innovation, to keep America, the U.S. in this case, at the forefront of these industries. So keep an eye on that.
Well, another story for NIST. Have you tried to access a government website lately, like particularly this week?
Yeah.
Well, if so, you probably saw something like this. If we can put up that slide. There we go. NIST closed. NIST and affiliated websites not available. This is from NIST's website, and as many of you know, the Baldrige program is no longer funded by the federal government, but its website is part of the NIST website, a government website. So if you were to try to visit the Baldrige website, you would see that message that we just showed. So on Tuesday, Quality Digest received an email message from Robert Fang, Meyer, acting director of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program, that even though the Baldrige site is down, the Baldrige program is still alive and well. And since it's short and sweet, here is the entire message from Fang, Meyer. All right. As most of you have likely heard, the federal government is shutting down due to a lapse in funding. While this will undoubtedly create hardship for many who work for and or rely on services from the government, I am happy to inform you that the Baldrige program will remain open. We expect that the only obvious impact on our customers and other shareholders will be the loss of our public website. If you are looking for information about the program or our services, please contact our customer service line at 301-975-2036. Gwen and or Jackie will be happy to help you. Hopefully, the shutdown process will go smoothly and end quickly, but I wanted to keep you and the Baldrige community informed. Very respectfully, Robert Fang, Meyer, Acting Director, Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. So there you go.
Yep, there you go.
Government down, Baldrige up.
Baldrige up, that's right. and hopefully, we're hoping that Robert Fang, Meyer will be able to join us possibly in a show
Actually,
coming up.
I emailed Robert Fang, Meyer, and he wasn't able to join us today because I really wanted to talk to him, actually specifically about how the Baldrige was doing now that it's privately funded, not government funded.
Well, in this case, maybe that's an advantage.
Well,
right?
that's exactly what I want to talk to him about, is this is actually it's a worthwhile topic, and Robert has said that he will come on the show in the future. So we'll get Robert Fang, Meyer, Acting Director of the Baldrige program, on maybe in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so check that out. And again, as usual, all the articles, those 2 news items, as well as the other feature articles that Dirk and I are going to be covering on the show, you can find right down there, right below this video player screen. You can check out the links and go read them to your heart's content.
There you go.
Okay, all right, well now, turning to our feature articles this week, we return to a topic that's proven very popular with you, our readers, over the past couple of weeks: conflict minerals. The business case for a long-term conflict mineral program, an article by Sonal Sinha, ran in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And in the piece, Sinha continues her call for a process-oriented approach to compliance to Section 1502 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. This specific section of the Act addresses the requirement that suppliers and manufacturers must disclose whether or not any tungsten, tin, tantalum, and/or gold found in their products were mined in support of wars, genocide, or other conflicts in regions such as the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, this is a rather complicated issue with many facets, so to help us understand what it all means, we're now going to be joined by the author of this piece, Sonal Sinha of MetricStream. Sonal, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for all the good work you've done to raise this issue. I think it's good for us all to know about and be aware of it. Those of us in quality assurance certainly deal with lengthy supply chains, and we need to know what's going on with those supply chains. So let's jump right into it. Now, Dodd-Frank requires disclosure of conflict mineral usage, but it doesn't really dictate how manufacturers must comply to that. So in your experience in working with this, how have you seen organizations approach compliance?
That's a great question. So, as you rightly mentioned, Dodd-Frank has, provided us what the end goal should be or would look like, but hasn't really given us a path of how companies should be getting there. So, what I'm seeing in the industry is that there are, 2 basic approaches to conflict minerals compliance. One I would term as a short-term approach, and the other I would term as a more long-term and sustainable approach. So a lot of organizations are taking, one or the other approaches, because most companies, by now realize that they have to comply with this requirement if they are subject to it, and have started taking steps in order to do that. So one of the first things that organizations are doing is they're looking at their current supply chain. They're trying to get and analyze and get an inventory of which products are in scope, what products might potentially contain these 3 TG items, and then trying to identify which suppliers are supplying them with those products. And this, as you probably might already imagine, can be a very, very complicated affair. As we are living in a global economy, we have very complex supply chains. So a lot of organizations have started using standard templates. The EICC has a good version. The EICC Jesse template is one of the versions that's very popularly used. So they're using these templates to reach out to the suppliers and gather that information, through very simple surveys on, do you contain conflict minerals? If yes, where are you getting them from? Do you know what the smelters you're getting them from, etc. So the survey approach is what we're seeing very commonly. Another approach, which is more of a long-term and a sustainable approach, is one that drives down into the bill of materials and the product level to actually identify and be able to track down and trace the supply chain and the components in the supply chain. So this involves a lot of integration with systems, integration with databases, being able to perform rules and validations in order to better understand and get more solid information on the status of their compliance with conflict minerals.
And many of us, of course, in our industry, we understand the benefits of long-term systems approach to the strategic approaches to this. But you term it a myopic approach. The short-term approach, you call it in your piece a myopic approach. Do you think there's a benefit to that? I mean, people are doing that, obviously. They're just kind of firefighting, I think, to try to deal with this by, I think it's May 31st, is that correct? When 2014, when this is due, I believe.
2014,
yeah.
Right.
So why would anyone take a short-term approach? Is there a benefit to that in any way that you can see?
Well, that's a great question that you ask. And one of the reasons why some organizations are taking a short-term approach is they're just not sure where this is going to lead to in the next few months, whether the direction that the industry is going in might change, whether there might be additional changes in the law. So we're not really just sure how this is playing around. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that it can get very expensive very, very quickly to dive down into supply chains, especially for organizations who have traditionally not done so. So the expense factor is one large one. So it's a cost benefit analysis, and a lot of companies are just honestly struggling trying to come up with an ROI on this compliance initiative.
We've seen in federal courts, and we've seen this reported on as well, that there's been some pushback from organizations and those in federal courts that are saying that being forced to disclose their usage of such conflict minerals violates First Amendment rights protecting the freedom of speech. So what would you say about that? Do you think that there should be protections that people should not have to disclose, or is this a bigger issue than that?
Right. This is a very interesting question you ask, Dirk and Mike. So yes, there have been petitions that have been arguing that it's a First Amendment issue over here that we're dealing with, that it's burdensome and it's stigmatic. So, I think there are a lot of, arguments that could be made on either sides of the fence. But when you take a step back and think about the intent and what the SEC was trying to achieve with the conflict minerals, with the Dodd-Frank requirement, what most companies, and MetroStream has done a survey called Thrive on Risk, and what we found is majority of respondents in that survey have identified that although they feel that this might not be very effective, right off the bat, and there might not be an immediate impact on the situation in the DRC or the covered countries, we are taking steps, so the SEC is taking steps in the right direction. So I think we're looking at something that's beyond just compliance, and we're going into this area of corporate social responsibility where the government is basically stepping in and trying to tell companies to do the right thing. So a lot of organizations are taking advantage of that and going above and beyond and using this as a leverage and a lever to then expand their corporate social responsibility program and reach out to their customers and let them know that we're not just are we complying, we're doing the right thing, and we're taking the right steps for world peace, world security, and we're all working towards the same common goal.
Sonal, just briefly as we wrap up here, where do we go from here? How can we expect the government to increasingly dictate transparency in sourcing and supplier relationships?
It's a very interesting question. And yes, I feel that where we're going from here is the number of regulations, types of regulations, especially as it pertains to the transparency in supply chains, is going to continue to increase. And, as a matter of fact, we've already been seeing that. When you look at the, as an example, the California Transparency in Supply Chain Act, so Senate Bill 657, you look at what's happening with FDA, with industries such as food, pharmaceuticals. We've already been seeing that the government is coming in and saying, you got to know what your supply chain is. You got to know where you're getting your products and what you're putting into them. Because at the end of the day, the customers have a right to know what they're buying. So I think we will see many more of these type of regulations. I think it's not going to stop. But when you take a step back and look at what organizations have to do in order to comply with, either conflict minerals or any other of these type of regulations, it boils down to very simply understanding and taking control of their supply chain.
Okay. So we actually have a question from one of our viewers right here, if we can pop that up, Christopher.
Sure.
What about raw materials? I have done the survey. How can I ensure what I'm getting from my suppliers?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there are various different ways to perform this level of due diligence. Some of them, can be very traditionally the audits. So one can leverage their internal audit team or their third-party auditors that organizations currently use to perform a variety of other audits to then add conflict minerals as part of their audit scope. So going back to the factories or the manufacturing facilities to understand and perhaps test a few items and confirm that what they are getting is indeed the right materials. So auditing is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is, of course, the surveys and the attestations that go above and beyond just the plain questionnaires. So that's another approach that I think organizations can take. And we're seeing a lot of that in the due diligence efforts. And a third approach that also we're seeing in the industry is sharing of information, which is sometimes more easily said than done. But the ability to be able to share some of the information or some information about the materials and then compare. If it's the same supplier that's providing the information, then potentially the materials might be very similar. So the ability to share, use industry standards, reach out in the industry, and be able to gather that information and talk to your colleagues, I think is very important.
Great. Well, thank you, Sonal. Great information as always from you and the team at MetroStream. Thank you for providing that to us. And anyone else out there have questions, please write us at qdlqualitydigest.com, and we'll make sure we forward them on to Sonal after the show and get you an answer. So, Sonal, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch up to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sonal. Okay, well, if you have set up some sort of gauging solution using multiple electronic gauges or LVDTs and so forth, you know that once you get more than a handful of gauges on a test jig, both the cabling and the instrumentation can actually become somewhat of a barrier. I mean, typically, if you look at a let's say a more complex gauging setup, you might have a separate digital readout for each gauge. So if you have a complex setup, you might have a number of different types of gauges, digital gauges, analog gauges. All these have got to be cabled into typically another piece of equipment with an individual readout on each one. So you've got all these cables running around. So both from a cabling standpoint and actually from a usability standpoint, it becomes somewhat of an issue once you get a lot of gauges. So the use of multiplexing addresses this issue. With a multiplexer, the output of a bunch of individual gauges can be combined into a single output and sent to a computer where it then undergoes demultiplexing and display. So there's a lot of advantages to this approach. Hopefully, if we have him on the Skype right now, here to discuss this a bit more in depth is Stuart Graham of Hyde & Hein. Hello, Stuart. How are you this morning? Oh, get the audio up on Stuart there. Hey, Stuart.
Hey.
Hey, sorry about that. So if you can just briefly describe, really quickly so we can get on to some other questions here, briefly describe what multiplexing is.
So basically, multiplexing is taking a bunch of different signals. In this case, it would be a number of gauges, and combining them digitally and logically, and then sending them through one means of transport to output. So in our case, it would be over Ethernet to a PC.
Okay, and what kind of signals, let's say, I know Hyde & Hein obviously makes a multiplexer. What kind of signals can a multiplexer accept? Is it analog signals, digital signals? What kind of equipment?
The MSC 1000 can take 1 volt peak to peak, an NDAT currently, and we are rolling out analog, TTL, and LVDT modules as well.
Okay, and are there any, I've worked with multiplexers before, and I know one of the limitations, or can be a limitation, is if you're looking at a lot of gauges, is the ability to take a snapshot of all of the gauges at the same time. And so this gets down, for those of you familiar with multiplexing, you may have to pull individual gauges, gauge number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. By the time you gauge to 15, there's a bit of a delay between reading the first gauge, reading the last gauge, as opposed to reading them all simultaneously. So is that an issue? And if it is, what are the limitations, if any, of a multiplexer system?
Okay, so our system, specifically for our Ethernet connection, we utilize UDP, User Datagram Protocol. And what that allows you to do is, we do pull sequentially, so we'll look at each one. But you can also choose to pick specific gauges individually, so you don't have to look at each probe before you look back at the first one again. And there would be a time delay there, but utilizing UDP rather than TCP/IP allows for a quicker transmission. So that's how we get around that.
Okay.
And we can take up to 250 inputs, and it'll update faster than the computer screen can refresh. So.
Okay. Actually, if, Daniel, I think we've got some B-roll there of Heidenhain's particular product. If you could run that, and then maybe Stuart, if you can talk over the top of what we're looking at here.
And this was shot in Chicago last month, I believe.
In Chicago last month,
yep,
yeah.
Yep.
So this is at your booth, and I believe that's one of your multiplexers we're going to zoom in on. Okay, what are we seeing here?
So here's the power module. This is the MSC 1000. Next to it is the basic communication module, and you'll see an Ethernet port there, and that's where it communicates with the PC. There's also 4 and 8 total. Those are NDAT probes. That's Heidenhain's bidirectional communication, and you can see there it's mounted on a standard DIN rail mount for easy mounting. And there's some Acanto Heidenhain probes and a machine that's going to measure a camshaft, so it's pulling it off right there. It's going to load on a new one. Some pneumatics are going to drop down some gauges.
So this is another application we're talking about where you might be able to use digital outputs from a multiplexer to control another piece of machinery. In that case, the arm that is actually loading the test fixture.
Yeah, on here we don't actually have the I/O module or input-output module, but there is an I/O module that will output 5-volt TTL signals. So you can program basic go, no-go type tolerancing things, and then you can send over a signal to a PLC to tell it to load a new part or what have you.
And just quickly, so I see all those black cables coming out of the back on the right-hand side there, so that's the right-hand side. Those are the multiplexer input cables, right?
Yes,
and
those are the encoder.
And you can just stack up those modules to give you up, would you say, up to 200 inputs?
We spec it for 250, up to 250. We tested it with 300. And like I said earlier, it was updating faster than we could see it, so
okay,
it's pretty quick.
All right. Now we are gonna. There is going to be a webinar on multiplexer technology coming up.
That's next Tuesday. That's the 8th of October, and it's 2 p.m. Eastern and 11 a.m. Pacific. So check that out. Actually, there's an article right below the player page right here. Again, you can register for the webinar right through there. And
there's kind of a brief overview of what we just talked about, as well as a link. Yeah, a link out to the webinar.
And you and Stuart are going to be presenting together on that one. So Stuart's presenting.
Right. I'll be
moderating.
I'll be the dummy, and Stuart will explain it all to me and to the attendees of the webinar. So, Stuart, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll see you on Tuesday, Stuart. Thanks a lot.
All right, another tech story here.
Yeah, another tech story here. That's right. Okay. Well, you know, Dirk, and then we actually just saw. It's interesting. We just saw a clip from Quality Expo last month in Chicago. We were there, and you know, the thing about trade shows like QE is that they're exhausting. You do a lot of walking and you do a lot of talking for me, but at least you get to see some really cool technology. And last month we were there in QE, Quality Expo in Chicago, and we got a chance to get a quick demo of Nikon Metrology's Nexiv VMZ R4540 CNC video measuring system. Easy for me to say. This week's Tech Corner is an interview and a little quick overview we took of that system. So check it out.
And we're at the Nikon booth here at Quality Expo here in Chicago. I've got here with me Banu Singh, who is a business development manager for Nikon. Is that right?
For the Vision products.
For the Vision products.
That's correct.
And what are we going to look at today?
What we're looking at today is our non-contact video metrology system. This is our high accuracy, high throughput system. It's a non-contact vision based, and this is our 3rd generation. We're introducing our 3rd generation tool at this show. It's our Nexiv system, so it's 3rd generation Nexiv, which means Nikon's excellence in vision metrology.
I always wonder what Nexiv meant. Yeah, there we go. Now, what makes this different? What makes this difference from your other machines?
From the previous machine, this is a higher accuracy, and a lot of the higher accuracy comes from the linear encoders, or basically the measuring linear encoders. Okay. And that technology is coming over from our precision department. So we have a precision department that makes the stepper scanners for the semiconductor business.
Okay.
So we're incorporating that high precision technology into the system. So higher end components, stronger laser, more capable laser. The software's been revamped, so it's been revitalized and updated. A lot of 3D graphics and so forth. So.
And this looks like a larger than the other Nexus machines.
It's a larger scale. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's actually 450 by 400, so that's why it's the VMZR 4540, and it's designed for larger parts, or also if people want to put on multiple parts, so they can put on a whole load of parts, walkaways, load and go, and also it's got a 200 millimeter Z-stroke, so taller parts.
And what are some of the features of this?
Some of the key features. This is actually a multi-sensor system. So one of the basic sensors, the most fundamental one is the vision sensor.
Okay.
So the vision sensor, the advantage over that with some of the CMMs, you'll see here is that it can collect thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of points very quickly without touching the part, versus tactile machines which have to collect one at a time.
Yeah.
The other sensor is a TTL laser, which simply means it's a through-the-lens laser, and it also gathers surface data. So you can use the TTL laser to focus on the part, you can use it to scan the surface of the part, and you can also do it to characterize the surface. So if you wanted to look at surface roughness or the profile, you could scan it with a laser.
And would the laser scanner have a higher accuracy than the vision system?
That's a good question. It typically does.
Okay.
So the laser is typically quicker, more repeatable, and more accurate.
Okay.
The other nice thing about the laser is the laser doesn't care what magnification you're at. This system has 5 mag positions.
Okay.
So for the vision, the higher mag you go, typically the more accurate, the more repeatable you are, because your pixel resolution increases. But the laser, because it's independent of the zoom optics, it doesn't care what magnification you're at, and it doesn't care what the illumination is.
Tell us about the ring light, because I think this is really interesting what you guys have done with the ring light.
One of our fundamental advantages we feel that we have is the algorithms we put in for edge detection. But the edge detection algorithms are only as good as the edge that you can illuminate.
Sure.
So we have 2 strategic things there. One is the illumination that you mentioned. So for illumination, we have 3 different types of illumination. We have illumination from the bottom, which is the diascopic, episcopic, and then the ring light that you were asking for. The ring light actually has 3 positions. And the advantage of the ring light is it's called oblique lighting, and it comes in and hits the part at an angle. So anything that has any kind of height, curvature, or surface to it, it enhances it very nicely so that you can measure exactly the edge that you're trying to get to.
Right.
Which is very important, because in a real world, typically customer parts have multiple edges, so you want to be able to pick the right one according to the design of the manufacturer of our customer's parts.
Right.
This ring light, another new feature over some of our older systems, is that it has additional positions. So you can drop it down 1/3 of the way, 2/3, or 3/3, depending on how you want to pick up that edge.
And that's clever, because what that does is that changes the angle that the light is hitting the edge, right? As you raise and lower the ring light, you're going to change the angle at which the light is hitting the.
Yes, sir.
And that's what helps you enhance the edge.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
I've never seen that before. I think that's really cool.
People actually ask, can we adjust how much it drops down?
Yeah.
The answer to that is the LEDs that are inside the ring light are actually angled to optimize for how far it drops down. So when you drop down this far, there's one row of LEDs that are angled in, and when it drops down, it illuminates the other row, which is angled differently.
Oh, okay.
And you're absolutely right. If you have every other lighting off and you drop this down, it's almost like a dark field inspection, things you would find on particle detection, defect detection machines.
Right.
So the machine is capable of not only measurement, but you can also do inspection, you can do defect qualification, quantification, find defect location, cracks, things of that nature on the surface.
Okay. And what market is this intended for?
The markets that we're into, we're very fortunate that way. It's very applicable toward automotive, medical, semiconductors. So we see a broad range of applications.
Okay. And obviously, you've got a somewhat limited field of view. If you're scanning a larger part, everything gets stitched together, I'm assuming?
That's one important thing, is being able to calibrate across the entire work surface.
Okay.
So we have proprietary calibration that allows us to do correlate field of view to field of view measurements. So regardless of whether you're inside the field of view or across the entire 450 by 400 surface area, all the measurements are coordinated. But not only across the stage, also across the sensors, because you want your laser data to be meaningful with your vision data.
Sure.
And then on some of our other systems, we even incorporate a third sensor, which is the touch probe. So one of our key advantages is being able to cross-calibrate so that all 3 sensors can be used in the same measurement program interchangeably.
Right. Okay. What about software with this?
Software-wise, it's called AutoMeasure.
Okay.
It's been around since the 90s. This is our 3rd generation of it. It's been updated with some 3D graphics, more point clouds. This particular one takes advantage of 64-bit processing.
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, on the vision side, you can collect a lot of data very quickly. When the laser scanning, you can collect up to 1,000 points per second on the surface. So you got to be able to process that data in a meaningful manner.
Okay.
So the AutoMeasure software not only measures the dimension, it also helps you apply geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. It tells you if your part passes or fails, but it is also able to transfer that data into some other analysis packages, where you can compare to CAD files and so forth. So.
Terrific. Okay, Banu, so this was the 3rd generation Nexif, right?
We're very proud to present the 3rd generation. It's better accuracy, better hardware, better software. We already have an excellent tool, excellent in the market, but even better, more improving on our return on investment for our customers. With the added capabilities, we're reaching into new markets. For example, the laser, it's able to look at thin transparent materials, and it's able to separate the top surface from the back surface. Very important for a lot of our electronics customers, medical customers. So we're very excited about the new capability. We're excited about the new size and the new accuracy, the linear encoders, and so forth.
Okay, so, terrific. Well, Banu, thank you. Thank you for running us through the Nexif.
My pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Sure, no problem. Back to you, Mike. I think he threw that back to you.
Or me. One of us, but well, there it is. There you have it.
Thanks to Nikon and Banu Singh for showing us the VMZ R4540 CNC video measuring system. There we go.
Good job.
A lot of cool stuff there at Quality Expo last month.
That's right. And thank you to Sanal Sinha as well.
And Stuart Graham of Heidenheim.
For joining us today on the show. And that is the show, Dirk.
That is the show. That's a nice techie-packed show today.
Yep.
All right.
So be sure to join us all. Remember one more time for next week's enhanced webinar with Heidenheim. And that's on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And again, register in the article.
And next week also, one of our favorite authors, Chip Bell, will be Skyping in to talk to us about one of his new books as well.
That's right. So check that out next Monday in QDD and next Friday here on QDL. So we'll see you then.
So long.